Wow, straps. Wow.
We're live. Yep, we're live. Okay, you can start because we live.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. We've been made to come join us so I can be in full transformation.
Hi.
Like the Zord and Power Rangers. Welcome to Teachsimple Podcast. We focus on providing simple solutions in the classroom. My name is Calvin Ellum, and I got my family and my lovely co-hosts here today. How y'all doing today? What's up?
Good. It's May Ellum and
Ariel Sanchez, finally in Detroit. Happy to be here.
Yeah, bro.
We're glad that you're here. So excited to have you.
A lot of smiles.
Yes.
How you been, man?
I've been good. Got here on Friday. Saw the city, how big it is. It's very beautiful. I see how diverse it is. And I see that Detroit is growing in the positive.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
yes,
bro.
Absolutely. So, you want to start off today's episode about what we got in store for our audience?
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, Ariel's been here for the week. We've been vibing and kicking it. As you know, he's been on the other episodes where we talked about multiple intelligence, the education of the Black in the South from Dr. James Anderson. You know, now we got him here in person, and today we're going to just talk about us. You know, just who we are. What was the whole point of Teachsimple Podcast, and also not only the Teachsimple Podcast, but specifically what was the whole purpose of us, becoming educators. We talk about the difference between being a teacher and an educator. You know, a teacher teaches a specific content area, but an educator teaches your kids how to survive, how to thrive in this world that we call, our world. And, we're educators, and we're going to talk about that story. We've been hearing this talk, but now it's like, how did we get here and why are we here today? And our lovely May, my lovely wife, she's going to interview us. And we'll maybe learn about May a little bit later, but she's going to interview us today.
Yeah, so this is going to just be a get to know your host. I think it's important to talk about the journey, how we got to where we are. So that way, maybe other people can relate. And it may not be in the field of education, but it may be in their field. So, when was your first teacher of color? When did you have your first teacher who was a person of color?
All right, I'll start off. It was in kindergarten. So the first 2 years, kindergarten and first grade, I was in bilingual. So I had one gen teacher and one ESL teacher. It was Miss Brooks. I don't remember too much on her teaching style, but I remember she was a woman of color. She had glasses, she had short hair, she had piercing, and those little earrings. But then the one that I can actually remember was Miss Robinson, who was my ELA English teacher in 8th grade. And she was pretty cool. She was very chilled and laid back. And yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, for me, it was Miss Williams. It was my first grade teacher. I never forget her. She was just short, like 5 feet lady, but she had real long hair. And I went to school in Murray Henderson, New Orleans. And I remember she was a teacher that taught me how to write, how to, capitalize a letter. And I never forget that. And she just was so pleasant and nice, and I learned a lot from her.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So you just mentioned the school system that you started off at, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where did you start off at?
I went to school in Queens, New York. I was first in PS 143, which is also named after Louis Armstrong, because Louis Armstrong, when he lived in Corona, Queens, he lived there until his passing. I was there for those first 2 years, and then I went to PS 14, which is also in Corona. Then I went to I-61 in Corona, and then I went to Flushing, Queens for high school.
Okay, cool. So the Queens public school system.
Yeah, the Queens public school system.
Okay, cool.
New York.
Yep. You?
New Orleans, New Orleans.
Okay. All right.
Nah, but actually, I grew up in Gretna, but I went to schools in Orleans Parish schools. So Louisiana, we have parishes, and my mom was born in New Orleans, but outside of like Orleans Parish is Jefferson Parish, which was like by the border, and so that's where I grew up. And I went to schools in Orleans Parish schools because my mom worked for the school board, and so it was so funny because I was a kid in the suburbs going to an inner city school, and that just brought up so many different dynamics. So I went to Murray Henderson, which was right next to Section 8 houses by the Fisher Projects, right across the street from Fisher. And after that, she took me out of Orleans Public Schools and then brought me into Jefferson Parish Schools. I went to Liverdays, which is the hardest school to ever spell. Imagine like right now you're heading Liverdays, which was a terrible experience. I'll never forget it. And then I went to West Jeff, the best school ever for 1 week. And then Hurricane Katrina happened. And then there was no more Louisiana schooling for me.
And then what happened after that? Where did you continue your schooling?
Yeah. So I went to a school in Fairfax County in Virginia. And that's like supposedly the best school district in the country. And that's just thing that's based off just like economics and like, funding and resources and just, just access, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
With Falls Church, then transferred to J.E.B. Stewart, who was a Confederate general. And they just actually switched the name to Freedom School, I believe. So I went to Freedom School for 3 years. Yep.
Okay, cool. So I started off in Union City Public Schools at Thomas Edison Elementary School. So that's where I did pre-K, which is where I had my first teacher of color. I was also an ESL student, so a language learner, English language learner. So she was my first teacher. It was my pre-K teacher, teaching me how to speak English. And but she was like the teacher that was like co-teaching. So she wasn't like my main teacher.
Parapro.
Yeah, I don't know if she was a parapro. I don't know, or she was just like a teacher assistant or an additional teacher in the classroom. From there, I went to Jersey City Public Schools. So I went from Thomas Edison to PS number 8 in Jersey City. So that's where I went until I was in 4th grade. Halfway through my 4th grade year, moved down to Virginia.
Oh, that was a tough time.
Suffolk.
Tough transition, but I started Suffolk Public Schools when I was in 4th grade. And then I remained there. So I went from Driver Elementary School to John Yates Middle School, where I have a lot of my longtime friends. That's where I met a lot of them. And then moved on to Nazareth River High School, all in the Suffolk public school system. So, yeah.
So public school, pretty much all of us.
So all of us are pretty much public school.
Public school babies.
And then my first, after that pre-K teacher, I didn't have another teacher of color, I think until maybe middle school, which leads to my next question, right? So who was when did you have your first male teacher of color?
High school, in 9th grade, living environment. It was Mr. Caruso. Mr. Caruso was the man. He was a giant. He had to be at least 6'6", 6'7". He played college football. I remember the very first day of school, because back in the day, I started high school in 2006. In 2006, wearing baggy clothes was the thing. And he took one look at me, and he was like, this kid's going to be trouble. So he sat me all the way in the front. So our relationship was a bit weird for the first 2 weeks of school. He thought he had to keep an eye on me because he thought I was going to be a troublemaker. Because I used to slouch a lot when I was in school. And he was like, all right, I gotta get this kid straight. But after him and I started having conversations about football and sports, he opened up and he became one of the coolest teacher I knew. And it's funny because we used to spend the majority of our time like after classes or if I saw him in the hallways, we were always talking about football or basketball and how he could beat us and then we're not going to be good enough to beat him, this, that, and forth. But my biggest highlight for him, one, he made me like science. He made science extremely cool. He broke it down for us. He let us use Skittles every time we was talking about neutrons and electrons. It was so cool. And then, so he was my first period class. So he used to always stand by the doorway, and he already had his class in check, where he had great classroom management. So he was always out in the hallways to make sure that everyone else is in their classroom. And since he's the freshman science teacher, everyone had him, one way or another.
Yeah.
Currently, or when the sophomores, juniors, the seniors, they had him. So everyone respected Mr. Caruso. It's not he wasn't an intimidated person. It's that he was so relatable, and he was just down to earth, really cool. And to this day, I still remember Caruso.
That's what's up.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's
Thank you
so
for
dope.
sharing.
Yeah. Same. He was kind of similar. Like for me, because in New Orleans, you're gonna have a black teacher, especially if you go to inner city school. And so I had a lot of black male teachers growing up. I just don't remember their names. I just remember their presence and just like the respect that they demanded off jump. But I remember this one teacher. I think his name was Mr. Reed. He was this like 6'2", skinny teacher, had a real big head. But he was my reading teacher. He was a reading teacher, and this was the first class where I had a teacher that pushed me to read at least 5 books, like out of that school year. And then during that school year, we read The Outsiders, and The Outsiders was like, everybody read that, you know what I'm saying? But like, he was that one teacher that introduced it to me. And we watched the movie, and I was like, oh man. But he was really significant, not just because of like he taught me.
Wow, straps. Wow.